So let's get started here. We're in the middle of talking about the concept of gardening, taking care of planting and watering and plowing, and now we get to cutting, right? Meaning, as we said from the very beginning, the melacha that's forbidden, that which the Torah doesn't want us to do, is a constructive act. It leads to creating certain things. So we've been talking effectively, the model that we have is making bread, right? So what are the other steps that go into it? So we started by plowing, right? So you prepare the ground, then planting a seed, that's the zoreya, and that was included watering. And now we move to, okay, once you plant the seed, Hashem does a lot of the work, right? Meaning the earth does a lot of the work. And the earth takes the seed and it turns it into wheat, right? It turns it into these stalks of wheat. So just because we have stalks of wheat doesn't mean it's ready to go. Even the stalks of wheat, there's work to do, right? Actually, a lot of work to do. So the first thing that has to be done is the stalks have to be cut, right? They have to be disconnected from the ground. You don't eat the wheat grown while it's still growing in the ground, right? And in fact, it's a highly involved process. Right, first we have to cut the wheat, but then you don't just take the stalks and just throw it into an oven and it becomes bread, right? Actually, you have to do a number of different things to turn the wheat into flour. Then you have to add water to the flour to knead it. Then you have to take that dough, right? You knead it and it becomes dough. And then after you knead it and it becomes dough, then you could bake it, right? So there's a lot of steps. But even before you could get to flour, there's lots of steps that go into it. So you cut it, and actually things that they have to do is you don't just cut it and then grind it into flour, but actually there's a whole process that has to be done. One of the things is it just has to be laid out to dry, right? Usually the wheat, when it's cut, is not ready for processing. It actually needs to be out in the sun for a drying type process. Anyway, and then the wheat that grows, most of it is not usable for flour. They have to actually find ways to separate the useful stuff from the non-useful stuff. So like, for example, the stalks upon which it grows upon are not part of the food at all. It's only the top piece that is used. And even there's a covering and a coating called the chaff, which we usually want to get rid of. And lots of other things that go into making bread. Bread is actually a highly sophisticated process. Actually, when I think of this, I think of one of the Divrei Torah that really impacted me a lot, that someone once told me. Many of us know him, Menachem Leibtag. He said, we lie all the time. Like, what do you mean we lie all the time? So he says, we say a beracha, Hamotzi lechem min haaretz, right? What does that mean? Hamotzi lechem min haaretz. It means Hamotzi lechem min haaretz means that he takes the bread from the ground, right? And that's not true, right? Meaning we don't take bread from the ground, right? There's no such thing as a bread tree or a bread plant, right? In fact, the bread is of all the foods. It's of all the basic foods, it's the most naturally, that we eat. It's the most processed. It's the most man-made. It's the most man-involved, right? In other words, compare it to, I don't know, eating fish, right? Eat a fish. What do you have to do? You catch the fish, you put it on the fire, you eat it, done, right? Okay. An apple, right? You take the fruit off the tree, bite into it, finished, right? And there's a lot of foods that fit into that category. Not bread. Bread is the most man involved, right? Bread is the thing that humans could say, wow, I did this, right? I made this bread, right? But what do we say in our beracha? Hamotzi lechem min haaretz, that Hashem took the bread out of the ground, right? Which, again, it's not factually correct, right? But what's the point? The point is that we have to identify all the things that we do, very nice, and then say, and that's the point of the beracha, even though I did all this, what am I really saying? I give the credit to Hashem, right? Even though human beings really make bread, right, or pasta or whatever, but what could we do, right? And again, this time, the coronavirus is a great time for us to realize that level of humility, right? Human beings are pretty powerful, and they are pretty significant, and we do have dominion over the earth, and that's what Hashem wants. But He doesn't want us to forget that really He has dominion over the earth. So we thought we could do anything, and humans could solve any problem and fix anything. We could get to the moon. We could make sure the economy only goes up. We could cure diseases. And then comes along this little virus that you can't even see, and you can't leave your house, right, for 2 months. And then what happens, right? Then the whole world is upside down, and everything is havoc. And the government will save us. Well, who's going to save the government, right? So our understanding has come at the same idea that we make with bread, which is, look at how much we depend upon Hashem about, right? And those berachot that we say every day, those are constant reminders for us to remember whatever element of control we have, and we do have some control. We can't forget, we can't lose sight of how little that is and how vulnerable we are, right? And looking at the steps that make wheat always reminds me of this, because look at what we've created. This bread is a phenomenal thing that we're able to create. But if any one thing goes wrong in any of those processes and any of the steps, you got nothing, right? And as proud as we could be about what we've created and what we can do, we have to always remember how much it involves Hashem's constant support. Anyway, let's look at this next idea. So the cutting, right? So hakotzer tivua or kitnit, v'habotzer anavim, v'hagoder temarim, v'hamosek zetim, v'haoreh te'enim, kol elu av melacha chaten. I'm actually going to read this list and translate it because I think it's important to realize it tells us a little bit about the Hebrew language and our culture. Hakotzer tivua or kitnit, right? Someone who kotzer, the word kotzer means literally to cut, right, or to make short, right, grain or some legume, some bean or something like that. Meaning someone takes something that's growing from the ground and cuts it from the ground, right? Meaning he detaches it by taking a blade and chopping it and cutting it, and now it's separated. V'habotzer anavim. So, but grapes is a different word. Botzer means to to pluck the grapes. V'hagoder temarim. And there's another word for dates, right, which are on a date palm. I don't even know how they take dates off the date palm, but there's a process. V'hamosek zetim, right, and someone who gets the olives off, which is a different process. V'haoreh te'enim, and someone who takes the figs off. The figs, they shake the tree and the things fall down. Each fruit has kind of a little bit of a different way, right? To us, okay, just go to the supermarket, right? Call the guy, bring it, right? But to the people who are, what we'll call farmers, and even farmers is way too generic a term, but the people who deal in agriculture and produce, which is very important, each food item has a very specific process by which that item that grows from the ground is detached from the ground. All of them, every single one of those different types of detaching processes are all included in this one melacha called kotzer, which means to cut. The basic one that the Torah was talking about was wheat, right? And wheat, what do they do? If you remember the old Soviet Union, the sickle, right? Well, on the flag, right? You take the sickle, and they go, they hold a bunch of wheat together, a bunch of stalks together, and all at one time they go whack, right? And they detach it, right? So to detach from the ground, all of that would be considered kotzer and forbidden on the halacha. In all of those various different processes that I mentioned, the goal is to do what? To take something that grows from the ground and detach it from the ground. They're all forbidden from the Torah. So of course, if I'm walking in an orchard or something like that, I may not see an apple tree or a pear tree or an orange tree or a lemon tree and go, boom, pull an item off. So if you have to be careful. Some of us have these kinds of trees in our in our gardens and near our homes or something like that. We have to be very careful not to do that. That's the equivalent of lighting a fire. Not allowed to be done on Shabbat.
Can you pick up an apple from the floor? I mean,
So we're going to get to that. That was the next thing. Perot shenashru min ha'ilan b'Shabbat asurim bo bayom. Let's say I'm walking down the street, right, and I see, or I have in my backyard, my in-laws have a pear tree in the backyard. So do I actually. I didn't, but it's more of a hassle than anything else, right? But so it grows. They counted about 2,000 pears a year, right? From one tree, so every in the season towards the end of the summer, right? They start dropping. Actually, it's near the house. Sometimes it drops on the house, and you hear boom, a thud. It's another pear dropping. Let's say I hear the thud and I go outside and I see, oh look, one of the pears dropped. Looks beautiful. Let me eat it. You cannot. You cannot eat something that dropped on Shabbat, not because I did anything wrong. I didn't. But there's a different concept, which is the pear, in order for it to be edible on Shabbat, and actually even to lift it on Shabbat, it has to be prepared and ready to go from the time that Shabbat starts. And this is actually part of the law of Muktzeh. So if an item is not kind of what we'll call ready to be eaten, if it's still attached to the ground, to the ground or the tree at the start of Shabbat, even if it falls off on Shabbat, I may not eat it, even if it falls off on its own. Or a goy comes and picks it, doesn't matter, no good. That item, if it's not ready for consumption at the start of Shabbat, it is not ready. It may not be consumed, it may not be lifted even on Shabbat. However, if I see that the item fell on Friday afternoon, an hour before sunset or a minute before sunset, and we have not accepted Shabbat, so then that fruit item is edible. I can go and I can pick it up off the ground and eat it on Shabbat. So a long answer to your very short question, Nathan, but a good question, because it shows us how the halacha works and what some of the basic premises and principles are. Okay. Gezerah shemei alevi etlosh, right? He says also there's another reason why this is not allowed. The other reason why this is not allowed is because we don't want to have anyone going and picking on Shabbat. In addition to the fact that it wasn't ready from before Shabbat, there's another aspect, which is if I let you, if the halacha lets me go around and pick up fruit off the floor, while I'm picking fruit up the floor, I'm going to easily, quickly not keep in mind, oh, it's Shabbat, and I'm picking off the floor. Oh, the tree's right here. Let me pull something off the tree. Not allowed to do that. Halacha from the Torah. So there's two aspects of why this is not allowed. One is because it's not prepared from before Shabbat, and two is the Chachamim wanted to protect me from not doing this melacha. Asur litlo. Okay. Asur litlosh afilu ma'atzit she'enu nakuv. You're not allowed to take from the ground. When we say from the ground, we don't even only mean from the ground, right? Let's say, and in Israel today, a lot of the fruit is grown not in the ground. Israel is a world leader in what's called hydroponics. I don't know if you've ever heard of this concept, but it's a fascinating thing. Israel didn't invent it, but when they heard about it, they went bonkers over it. Hydroponics is it's a field of science where you can grow produce, agriculture, without the earth, without the ground, right? You need the water. The water is very important, but the earth, for the most part, the goal of the earth is to hold it in place, and for the water to get there at appropriate times, and sometimes to provide other nutrients. But basically, you don't need earth. You could provide other things that can provide that and that could do that, and you could therefore grow things in the ground. You could grow things that normally grow in the ground without the ground. And they, for example, what do they use? Sometimes they use gravel, like the stuff that you use to pave streets. right? And sometimes they use metal, little bits of metal. It's amazing. It's a fascinating science. Israel caught wind of this in like the 1980s, and then they went bonkers on it, and they saw how everyone was doing it, and they said, very nice, we could do it better. And they took all the science that was known at the time, and they threw it out the window, and they said, we're going to figure it out our own way, typical Israeli. And of course, they became the world leaders in growing it this way. Therefore, when you're in Israel, if you go to the right places, you'll see these huge greenhouses where they're growing things. But what's interesting about the greenhouses is they're not they're not on the ground. All the items are on the table, right? Like they all the field, so to speak, is a table with trays and filled with either gravel or aluminum or other materials. It's a fascinating idea. Anyway, for the purpose of what we're getting to, you're not allowed to pull off of that either, right? You might say, oh, that's not growing from the ground, right? Or not hydroponics, right? I have a flower pot of stuff, right? You can't pull off of that either. Whatever is being used as the ground is also forbidden. Of course, one of the things that you could see that I'm not allowed to do is I'm not allowed to cut the grass, right? Which we talked about the other day. So for sure, I am not allowed to mow my own lawn, nor should I, start picking dandelions or, uprooting the grass or anything like that. Whatever is growing, I should leave it growing, and I should not uproot it. Okay. Question? No. Okay. Now, because of this concern, the Chachamim have some concerns about how I use a tree on Shabbat. We're going to see that using a tree runs into problems. The Chachamim were concerned about me using a tree on Shabbat, either because I might pull off, once I'm using a tree, I might pull off some fruit from that tree, or I might break off a branch, which may not be the fruit, but it doesn't matter. It's a branch, right? And I can't break off a branch on Shabbat. So we're going to see a couple of things that go into this. And olim be'ilan b'Shabbat, ben be'ilan lach, ben be'ilan yavesh, ve'en nitlim bo, ve'en mishtamshim v'mechubar lekarka klal, gezerah shemei ya'aleh v'yitlosh mimenu perot o alim v'anafim. I'm not allowed to climb a tree on Shabbat. Right? Why? Because I might either inadvertently break off a branch or actually break off a branch, and they don't want us to do that. And because of that, they don't want us to use trees pretty much at all. Like they don't want you to lean on it, tie a hammock to it, or things like that. And I know if you're thinking about the hammock, so you'll say, oh, wait a second, so I can't sit in my hammock that's tied between two trees on Shabbat. We're going to get there. It's not so simple. But basically, that's the concern, right? The concern was that if I'm using the tree in one way, shape, or form, I will break something off for some purpose. So look at this. I mean, this next halacha is a staggering one, right? It says, so don't try this at home, right? Im ala le'ilan b'Shabbat b'mezid. He says, if on purpose, I know it's forbidden, and I went up on, and I said, you know what? I don't care about that halacha. I go up onto the tree, right? I climb onto the tree. Asur lo laredet mimenu ad motzei Shabbat. You're not allowed to get off, which, so you're stuck in the tree, right? It's called the fire department, but you can't leave the tree. Mishum knas, because it's kind of like a penalty, right? But he says, but if you went up and you didn't realize, either you didn't realize it was a tree, or you didn't realize it was Shabbat, or you didn't realize it's forbidden. And now as you're climbing up the tree, right, someone comes along and says, hey, didn't we learn that you can't climb a tree on Shabbat, right? And you do, right? So you can come down, right? At that point, you could come down. So I don't know. This class may have put you in a bad spot, right? Because now you can't climb a tree on Shabbat, and if you would have climbed a tree, you'd have to stay there. So don't climb any trees on Shabbat. But if you didn't know, and if you see someone who didn't know, you can have them come down, and it's not forbidden. Okay. והעולה באילן מבעוד יום, אפילו שבדעתו היה להישב שם בשבת, מותר לו לרדת בשבת, כיוון שעלייתו הייתה מבעוד יום. Says, and now the question is, what if I went up on the tree on Friday afternoon, right, and I was hanging out there, right? Now, can I come down, right? And the answer is yes. Since you got up there with permission, meaning while it was allowed to climb the tree, it's no problem to come down. Okay. So let's get to the last halacha. You know what? All right, I'll do one more. Just like you can't use the tree itself, you can't use the sides of the tree. So you can't use something that's stuck into the tree or tied around the tree. But something that's leaning on something, that's okay. What do we mean? Let's say there's a ladder that's leaning on the tree, right? You may not climb the ladder that's leaning on the tree. Or there's a basket hanging from one of the branches of a tree. You can't take something out of the basket or put something into the basket. Because I'm using the tree. However, if there's a screw in the tree and then the basket is hanging off on the screw, that's okay. So a hammock will be okay. Why? Because a hammock is a mat that I'm going to lie on, but the rope is tied to the tree, which is usually tied to a screw, which is into the tree, so it's okay. But you know, you can see where this gets complicated. So you can't use the tree itself, right? So basically, I myself am even not supposed to, lean against the tree, hold on to the tree, or something like that. It's a pretty strict area of halacha that most people don't know much about and don't think anything about. We're going to talk more about it tomorrow as to other implications and stringencies and leniencies and so on. So we're going to stop here for today. I want to thank everyone for joining last night.